Thank you for participating in this online training module, Child and Youth Protection for Preventing Sexual Abuse. This presentation will prepare you for the test linked below. In order to keep all children and youth safe from sexual abuse, we must be familiar with the definitions and statistics of sexual abuse as they relate to children and youth. We must work together to prevent sexual abuse from occurring. We must recognize the signs and behaviors of victims and perpetrators, and we must understand our responsibility to report suspected sexual abuse. According to the comprehensive online resource, Darkness to Light, child sexual abuse is likely the most prevalent health problem with the most serious array of consequences that children face. Child sexual abuse is defined as any contact or interaction between a child and an adult when the child is being used for the sexual stimulation of the adult person or a third person. The behavior may or may not involve touching. Sexual behavior between a child and an adult is always considered forced, whether or not consented to by the child. About 1 in 10 children, that is 1 in 7 girls and 1 in 25 boys, will be sexually abused before the age of 18. Nearly 70% of all reported sexual assaults, including assaults on adults, occurs to children under the age of 17. More than 90% of juvenile sexual abuse victims know their perpetrators in some way. Sexual abuse occurs at every socioeconomic level, across ethnic and cultural lines, within all religions, and at all levels of education. There are 60 million sexual abuse survivors in the U.S. today. 66% of sexual abuse victims don't tell of their abuse until adulthood, if ever. About 80% of 21-year-olds who were sexually abused as children met the criteria for at least one psychological disorder. About 30% of abused children will later abuse other children, continuing the horrible cycle. According to North Carolina law, any person or institution who has cause to suspect that a child under the age of 18 is abused or neglected must make a report to the County Department of Social Services. We must be vigilant in recognizing and reporting abuse. Sexual abusers are drawn to places where they have access to children. Most abusers are individuals who are known and trusted by the children they abuse. The abuser will gain trust and access to children through deception and a process called grooming. Common grooming behaviors include gift-giving, repeated time alone with the same child, pushing physical boundaries by touching a child in a playful but inappropriate way. Behavior signs of a victim of sexual abuse may include regressive behaviors, avoiding undressing, wearing extra layers of clothing, unusual changes in bathing or hygiene practices, a decreased interest in school or childhood activities, becoming withdrawn, becoming aggressive, displaying sexually suggestive behaviors, depression, having nightmares, or verbal disclosure. Sexual abuse perpetrators use different tactics to ensure their victims will keep the secret of abuse. They often use shame and threats. It is important that we help children understand the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. Bad secrets always exclude or hurt others in some way. The purpose of the Child and Youth Protection Policy for Preventing Sexual Abuse is to protect our children and youth as well as the adults who care for them. With the guidance of these procedures, each member, especially our volunteers working with children and youth, help to create a safe and trusting environment for everyone. With all the healthy and vibrant ministries of Westminster in mind, we have sought to craft a policy that welcomes members into community and faithful service, builds and maintains an atmosphere of trust, and upholds the importance of a safe environment, protecting the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of children, youth, and the adults who care for them. For the purpose of this policy, a few definitions. Child is any individual, infant through 5th grade. Youth is any individual, 6th grade through 12th grade. Adult is any individual 18 years or older. This person must be at least 5 years older than the oldest child or youth with whom they are volunteering. All adults volunteering with children or youth must have been active members or consistently attending Westminster for at least 6 months before beginning a volunteer assignment. All adult members wishing to volunteer with children or youth in any capacity must complete and sign the application and background check consent form. This document will be held on file by the office manager. Primary volunteers are individuals with a high level of contact with children or youth, such as overnight trips, retreats, and extended programs. Primary volunteers, as well as all pastoral, program, and nursery staff, automatically undergo a background check prior to working with children or youth. Secondary volunteers are individuals having low contact with children or youth, such as Sunday morning church school teachers, confirmation mentors, and nursery volunteers. These volunteers will also complete the application and background check consent form. This form will be held on file by the office manager, and a background check will be conducted only if deemed necessary. All volunteers working with children or youth will participate in an initial mandatory training, including the Child and Youth Protection Policy for preventing sexual abuse. Additional guidelines and procedures are provided for each respective volunteer position. At the heart of this policy is the 2 unrelated adult rule. There is to be at least 2 unrelated adults present at all times during any activity or event involving children and/or youth. This rule is consistently seen as one of the best practices in churches the size of Westminster. Our nursery staff members are available to serve as the unrelated adult needed when married couples serve together in the nursery. Any individual who observes questionable or inappropriate behavior affecting children or youth has a duty to report the incident as soon as possible. If a child reports an abuse incident to you, listen and remain calm. Be patient, gentle, and compassionate. Let the child lead the conversation. Do not ask leading questions. If possible, write down what the child has told you. Immediately report the incident verbally to the pastoral or program staff, who will then notify the head of staff and clerk of session. Once the proper authorities have been contacted, a report will be made back to the first person witness. To the extent possible, the confidentiality of all persons involved is to be safeguarded. Any person accused of sexual abuse is to be treated with dignity and support. The accused person will be immediately relieved of further responsibilities until an investigation is complete and allegations are cleared. All events involving children or youth are to be conducted in such a manner that parents, guardians, other volunteers, and church staff can visit and observe the activity. Windows in classroom doors are to be unobstructed, or doors are to remain open. It is important to maintain respectful and appropriate physical boundaries with children and youth. Volunteers and staff should let the child take the lead in initiating physical contact. For example, let a child approach you if they want to be hugged. Side hugs are an appropriate way to approach a youth. Diapering is only to be done by the nursery staff and is to be done in plain view of other adults. If the parent of the child is present, that parent is to change the diaper. Only the nursery staff are to accompany a young child to the restroom, giving the child as much independence as possible. If the child requires assistance, the door of the restroom is to remain open. If a child is sick and requires assistance, the nursery staff is to call for another adult. When needed, discipline is to be conveyed with kindness and with the goal of helping a child or youth develop a healthy sense of responsibility and self-control. All forms of violence used against children and youth are strictly prohibited. Corporal punishment is never to be used. This includes, but is not limited to, slapping, spanking, pinching, and shaking. Verbal and emotional abuse are also strictly prohibited. This includes, but is not limited to, yelling, scolding, shaming, and using fear. The physical restraint of a child or youth is only appropriate when the safety of the child or youth or another person is at risk. Appropriate discipline establishes clear expectations, provides rewards and incentives for appropriate behavior, and uses verbal disapproval, loss of privileges, and redirection to teach acceptable behavior. All drivers of children or youth must have primary volunteer status and training, including a current approved background check. When children or youth are being transported for a designated church activity by a staff member or volunteer, the driver is to be accompanied by at least one unrelated adult. Children being transported must always be accompanied by two unrelated adults. If transporting youth and only one adult is available per vehicle, no fewer than 3 people of any combination of youth and unrelated adults is to be together in the vehicle. If it becomes necessary for one adult volunteer or staff member to transport one youth, the adult volunteer or staff member shall attempt to contact the parent of the youth to inform them of the transportation situation. As soon as the youth has been dropped off, the adult volunteer or staff member shall attempt to speak to or contact the parent to inform them of the safe outcome. Social and digital media, such as texting, email, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, can be great ways for adult volunteers and staff to connect with youth. However, these tools must be used wisely and cautiously. We encourage social media for communicating with youth in groups or in an open forum. Using social media for in-depth, private conversations between an adult and a youth is highly discouraged. Staff and adult volunteers must be judicious when posting on social media sites, as this reflects on the church, its ministry, and ultimately on the body of Christ. So what can parents do to help? We need everyone's help in keeping our children and youth safe. Parents can help in these specific ways. Volunteer to serve in the nursery and get to know the nursery staff. Join a Sunday morning church school teaching team. Volunteer with the youth programs. Know where your child or youth is at all times. If leaving your young child in the nursery, be consistent with the sign in and sign out process. Before leaving your young child or infant in the nursery or church school, take him or her to the restroom or change his or her diaper. So what can adult volunteers do to help? Volunteer often and substitute when you are able. When you volunteer, arrive on time. Help to create the welcoming atmosphere you would wish to experience as a guest or visitor. We are grateful for our team of skilled professional caregivers. They are trained in the areas of early childhood education, nursing, and special needs. Westminster's nursery staff contributes to the collaborative effort to create an atmosphere of comfort and safety, putting parents and children at ease and ready for learning and growing. God has entrusted us with the future as we bring our children and youth up in the church. The nurture and care of each is in our hands. Together, let's build a place where everyone feels a sense of belonging, where children and youth know they are loved, and where Westminster Presbyterian Church is known for wide hospitality and warm welcome. Thank you again for participating in this training module. Now please take a few minutes to complete the process by taking a brief test found at the link below. When you have finished the test, please complete the application and background check consent form and return it to the church office.